Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on engineering searches for non-engineers. I'm Ted Karen at the ProQuest Dialog Help Desk. And you know, ProQuest Dialog has many databases that cover a range of topics. The information is both wide and deep, and it covers many subjects that can be both complex and specialized. Medicine, pharmaceuticals, patents, and a lot of engineering. And you may find yourself tasked with doing research in these areas, even if it is not your primary area of expertise. If so, you are not alone. In fact, there is a broad trend in business and research today where everyone in the organization is expected to be able to do their own research and research for others as well. So it can be challenging. And sometimes the challenge begins with finding the right words and phrases to search on. After all, that's what most searches are made up of. So if you don't know a lot of the inside jargon, how do you begin? So today I want to talk about some ways to get started in that situation, ways to move your search forward, ways to start out with just basic knowledge and then use a set of tools and techniques that will enlarge your search vocabulary and bring both depth and focus to your results. So let's get started. Here is an outline of how we'll proceed. First, we'll talk a bit about the engineering databases, what they are, how to select them. We'll also take a look at how to modify the standard selections in these industry groups and to create groups of your own. Then we'll do a series of searches. I want to do 4 of them today in various engineering areas, and along the way we will highlight a number of different ways to enhance your vocabulary and your search results. What I want to do is, rather than show you a series of slides with exact steps to be taken, I want to walk you through and talk you through and sort of think out loud at each step of the way. But before we do the searches, any search begins with starting in some databases, so let's talk about that. When you first log into ProQuest Dialog, you probably see something like this toward the bottom of your page, this set of industry groups, and these are a very useful way to select your databases. You may have noticed that quite a few of them fall into the engineering category. The other major category would be medicine and pharma and healthcare, but you see quite a few of them have to do with engineering, and these are the ones we're largely going to be talking about today. There are 2 engineering databases that I particularly want to highlight today because they cover such broad areas of engineering and are certainly going to be among the databases you'll want to use in all of these searches. One is called Inspec and the other is EiCompendex. So let's take a look at each of these. Here's an overview of Inspec. This is a database put out by the Institution of Engineering and Technology. They are a learned society. They're based out of the UK, but they gather together records, documents, studies, papers from all over the world. They've been doing this for many, many years. They have records going back more than 100 years, and these are the major areas of engineering that they cover. You can see that it is quite a wide area, including many of the modern technologies in computing and information technology. They have some 17 million records as of now. They add close to 1 million every year nowadays. And I want to point out that in addition to many journal articles, they also have quite a few conference proceedings and conference papers. These are important because, as you may know, these conferences where the top experts get together to discuss their current research and their latest papers are a great place to find the most cutting-edge material, what is going on right now in that area of research. The other of these 2 major databases is EiCompendex. This is put together by Elsevier. They have some 18 million records. They also go back many years to the late 1800s. They have a focus on applied engineering with about 6,500 primary sources. They also cover quite a few conference proceedings and many countries. Considering how broad both of these databases are, it is interesting to note that the overlap is only about 30%. ProQuest Dialog will remove the duplication automatically for you, But the point is that you really do want to use both at once, because one alone will cause you to miss a lot of really good material that you'd find in the other. This database has PDF links that you can click on to find the full articles. Inspec has those as well, and that is no small thing. If we have time at the end, I'd like to walk you through how to use those. These are the subject areas of EiCompendex, and as you can see, this cuts all the way across the range of engineering topics, and we'll be using this database as well in all of our searches today, as well as a number of others depending on the subject. So now let's go into ProQuest Dialog. I've logged in, and we'll take a look in there at some of our options for choosing our databases. So here we are on our home page. For most of us, this is the home page. We're on the basic search page, and that's where you will find the list of industries that have been created by our content people. Yours might look slightly different depending on what databases you have, but you probably have a selection somewhat like this. And you can click on any one of these. Let's take aerospace. And when you either hover or click on it, you will see the title of that list come up together with the start of the list of databases. I'm going to click here on the title of the industry where it says Search Aerospace and Defense. And that brings up a list of the databases that are in this group, together with a nice thumbnail description of a paragraph for each one of these. This is a good resource for you to see what each of these databases is about, and that can help you decide which of these databases you want to actually use, or which of them perhaps you want to omit in doing your search. And let me show you how that's done, because you should know that when you click on one of these industries, you will automatically be put into only the databases that are in that group. I've gone from 100 databases now to 29, but I don't have to stay in all 29 of those. All I have to do is click here where it shows my number of databases. Here's 29, and there's a check mark next to each of the databases in that group that I'm now in. And what I can do is modify this. I can add some if I want, or I can take some out. Some of these databases, like these near the beginning, are not really hardcore engineering databases so much as they're business databases, ABI and Form. And they do have a lot of good information, but you may not want that type of article for a given search. If that's the case, you can just deselect those databases. Maybe you don't want the newspaper databases. You can deselect those. Again, they're good databases, but if you don't want them for your particular search, you can just go to any one of these and deselect them. And then when you click on this button, Use Selected Databases, you will be only in the ones that have remaining check marks. While we're here in this part of the list, I want to point out something else to you. This entry here, ProQuest Advanced Tech and Aerospace Professional, that is not just one database, but if you click this plus sign, you'll see that when you're in that group, you're in all of these databases here. You also have the option of deselecting any of these if you want before you click Use Selected Databases, but it's these ones that start with ProQuest that tend to have these subparts. That's something you may not ever have noticed before, and I want to take the opportunity to make you aware of that. But I am just going to stick with these 29 databases to do my search. And let's get started with that search. Here's our first one in Aeronautical and Space Engineering. I'll mention quickly that Dialog itself has a long history in this area. Some of you may know that the original Dialog company started out at Lockheed as a way for Lockheed aircraft to keep track of all of their research and be able to retrieve all of the research they had done so that they would not have to keep doing the same research over and over again. That was way back in the space age, in the early days of NASA, and that was how Dialog actually got started. So we still maintain a strong tradition in that field of engineering. And here's a search we're going to do today. Here are some of the databases that we will use. I won't dwell on these. I'll send you this list. You'll want to certainly use these engineering databases, and you may also want to include the business databases that I spoke of, and the news articles, as well as dissertations and theses. That's where you'll find lengthy articles by people who really studied deeply into their topic. And specifically today, we're going to look for records about flight control systems for drones. Now, we all know what drones are. The big ones used by the military and the smaller ones that are used for surveying and photography and by hobbyists. And they all require some kind of flight control system, right? And that is what we want to research today. But while we all use the word drone for these aircraft, I think we can be pretty sure that an engineer would use a different term for it. And our challenge is we may not really know what engineers call these things, these drones, when they write about them in technical documents and scholarly papers. So how can we find that out? And we're going to look at a couple of ways to do that today. So let's go back into ProQuest Dialog and start on that. So here we are in the aerospace and defense databases. We're in basic search now. I'm going to go into command line to give us a nice big search box, and also so that I can use this link here for Thesaurus. The Thesaurus is a great tool to use when you're really not sure what terms you want to search on. So let me show you that by clicking on this. We have about 30 databases altogether that have thesauri. This is just a list of ones for the databases that we're in right now, and the one we're going to use is from Inspec. And what I'm going to type in here, instead of drone, I'm going to try to guess what term might be used. I'm going to type unmanned aircraft. Okay, and click Find. And what we get down here is unmanned aerial vehicles, our first hit. So that looks pretty good. Let's click on it and see what else we can find. We see here that the preferred term is autonomous aerial vehicles. So we're making progress. We have more terms now here to use for these drones. Next, I'm going to click on this sticky note here, and this shows you what the term is used for in the database. And as you can see here, it says that this term, autonomous aerial vehicles, is used for unmanned aerial vehicles, what we searched on, and also UAV, which I take it is short for unmanned aerial vehicles. So we've made progress here. We've got 4 terms to look on: unmanned aircraft, unmanned aerial vehicles, autonomous aerial vehicles, or UAV. So let's search on all of those. Just so you know, it is possible in any database that has a thesaurus to use the thesaurus to create your search set. In this case, all I would do is I would put a check mark here next to autonomous aerial vehicles and click Add to Search. And as you can see, that creates a search here. I can go ahead and run it. And it runs as a search in the exact subject field, su.exact. And in this case, we get 11,840 hits. But that's not what I actually wanted to do. My idea here with this one was to use the thesaurus not to directly create my set, but to use it as a way to find vocabulary for doing a plain language search. I've already actually copied this to my clipboard, so I'm going to paste it in. And here we have this search. This is going to look for autonomous aircraft or unmanned aircraft. It's going to search for UAV. It's going to search for unmanned aerial vehicle. So this should cover the ground that was suggested to us by our thesaurus search. Let's go ahead and run that. Wow, so that is a huge jump. By doing the search that way, we have got over 306,000 results in these databases. So that's 2 different things you can do with the thesaurus: create a set with it or use its terminology to do a search like this. And this has been successful. What we want to do next then is to add flight control systems. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll search for it as an exact phrase. And I'll put an asterisk. That'll be an easy way to put truncation and make sure we get the plurals since we're searching as an exact phrase. We'll go ahead and do that. Some people would use the Thesaurus to check on flight control too, but in this case, I'm pretty sure the records I want are going to use that phrase. So that got a lot of hits as well, but we haven't yet combined them. One way we can do that is to go up here to our list of recent searches. And there's a handy box here for doing just that kind of task. So what I want to do is add together our plain language search for the drone terms and our set 3 with the flight control systems. So that'll be S2 and S3. And when we do that combination, we should be making really good progress toward a workable number of records. So 5,942 hits, that's still quite a few. We probably want to cut this down a bit more. Let's think about ways we could do that. We could go to limiting by date. We could limit by a certain type of document. Let's try something else first. What we could do is, instead of getting everything that has flight control systems and that has any of those words for drone, let's put in a requirement that those be within a certain reasonable distance of each other so that we know that the record is talking about flight control systems for UAVs or those other terms. So I'm going to substitute for and. Instead, I'm going to put near 10. So they have to be somewhat close to each other. Let's see what that does for us. All right, that cut it way down. Let's do one more step to narrow it down further. We could use source type to cut this down to just scholarly journals and conference proceedings. You would do that by clicking here on more options and then just put check marks here and then narrow my results. Let's consider this peer-reviewed. 77 of those. These will all be peer-reviewed articles that talk about flight control systems and any of those terms for drones that we learned in the Thesaurus and that are peer-reviewed. So let's click on that. And we are left with 77 good hits. All right. So we used the Thesaurus as our primary tool for building vocabulary in this one. Let's take a look at another type of search. So let's do a search in Automotive Engineering. We have here some suggestions for databases, but I'm going to do my search in the automotive industry group. And we're going to look for articles about adaptive cruise control and braking and the effects of this on safety or on preventing collisions. I don't know if you're familiar with adaptive cruise control. We've all driven cars that have regular cruise control. You set the car's speed to a particular speed, like 55 miles an hour, and the car maintains that speed whether you're going up a hill or whatever, even if you take your foot off the accelerator or even if you're going up a hill. The problem is, if you're in traffic, you may start to creep up on the car in front of you, and then you have to tap the brake or in some other way turn off the cruise control. So now there's a more modern option where your car will actually sense how close you are to the car ahead of you. And if your regular cruise control brings you too close to the car ahead, the adaptive cruise control will adjust for that. It'll slow you down or speed you up again and maintain a safe distance while trying to target your selected speed. So it does this using sensors. It will adjust your accelerator and I believe apply your brake as needed, but that's part of what I want to find out today. So that's why braking is going to be part of the search. So where do we start? Well, first of all, we're going to want to explore this term, adaptive cruise control, and make sure we're using all of the appropriate terms to find the records that we want. So let's go into ProQuest Dialog. We'll begin this time in the automotive group of databases. And we'll go to command line so that we can easily access the Thesaurus. And let's try a search for adaptive cruise control in the Inspec Thesaurus. Nothing. We don't really want adaptive control. That's too broad. So that's not really working for us in this case. Let's try just cruise control. Nope, nothing there either. The Inspec Thesaurus has, I think, 10,000 terms that it looks for, but in this case, it's not helping us, so we want to find another way to go about this. Let's start with just a plain search for the phrase adaptive cruise control and create a set for it just for starters. Okay, and now let's try using the subject field, narrow by subject. Click the plus sign, then more options, and these are all of the keywords or indexed subjects that appear in this set. We could scroll through here, but that's a little difficult, so what I prefer to do with these bigger lists is to go to Save List. I'll save it as Excel. And that will create a nice spreadsheet for me that I can search through. So here we have it. In fact, this is still a pretty long list. I'm going to actually use Control F and search for cruise. So there's adaptive cruise control. There's cruise control, autonomous intelligent cruise control. Okay, that's something we didn't know about. We'll want to use those. We're back to adaptive again, but with a hyphen. And that looks like that's about it. So that's all we're getting out of here, but we got some new possibilities here with the intelligent adaptive cruise control. We can work that into our search, but let's try something else as sort of a backup. Let's try looking for that new word we found in the Thesaurus, intelligent cruise control, in Google. And look what we find. We find a whole group of synonyms here. Autonomous cruise control, also called adaptive cruise control, radar cruise control, traffic aware cruise control. So by going first to the Thesaurus and then by just checking the web, we were able to expand out our list of terms to search on. I'm actually going to use copy paste. I put this together before just to save time. And I'm going to use this as my next search. So now I'm looking for autonomous or intelligent or adaptive or radar or traffic aware right before pre/0 the phrase cruise control. Let's run that search. This is probably going to get more hits. And it does. Not a huge additional number, but that did increase our hits. So what do we want to do next? We wanted to combine this with a search for brakes or braking. So we have our set 2 here. Let's do S2, and we'll use some proximity. Let's say near 10. Brake. We don't have to use brakes because ProQuest Dialog will search for the plural automatically. So we'll put brake or braking, as in braking systems, and we'll combine these two concepts of the cruise control, using all those different versions of it, together with brake or braking within 10 words of each other. Very good. We've reduced the number of hits down to something that's fairly reasonable, but we also want to make sure that the hits we're getting talk about safety or avoiding collisions or accidents. So let's add that building block. We'll do S3 and accident or safety or collision, close paren, and we're down to 7,800 hits. That's still quite a few. Let's consider what might be a reasonable way to limit this further. There are source types, document types. Let's look at the databases in this case. We searched in the entire group, but that doesn't mean we have to keep all of these records, because if we notice, so many of these records are from the newspapers, and they may be good articles, but we're searching here for something a little bit more academic, more engineering oriented. And one of the ways we can do that is by controlling the databases a little more tightly. And in fact, we're seeing that the engineering databases are down here toward the bottom of our list. They got a more modest number of hits, but these are the ones we want. So we can use this filter to select these databases. PsycInfo, believe it or not, has quite a few scientific type databases that are not necessarily about psychology. So we're going to pick these engineering type databases here, as well as SciSearch. And we'll skip the ones that are more like business news. Okay. Narrow my results. There we go, and now we have a good number of hits. We started out using the Thesaurus, and when that was not successful, we went to using the subject field, and we tried searching actually within the subject field in order to modify our set. After that, we supplemented the results of our subject search by going to the web and doing a Google search. That gave us some additional vocabulary. We put all that together, and then we looked at some ways of narrowing the results to get what we wanted. And we ended up with 286 nicely narrowed, very useful results. Okay, so that was a good one also. Let's do another automotive search. So next, let's do a search about backup cameras in cars and collisions or accidents. As you know, the newer cars more and more have a backup camera. At least that's what I would call it. That lets you look at a screen in your dashboard while you're backing up, and it shows you a live view from the rear of your car from a little camera that's facing backward, and it shows you what's behind you and how close you may be getting to another car behind you, or even if you're backing up towards something else like a person. So it's a great convenience when you're parking, and it was also invented as a safety feature. So in this search, we're going to do a little bit of research about these backup cameras, and in particular, how they relate to safety in driving. So let's go back into ProQuest Dialog. We're still in the automotive search group. Let's start once again with trying the Thesaurus in Inspec. And we will try backup camera. No, not really seeing anything there. Again, the Thesaurus is very often successful, but this is another tough one. So let's just do a regular search for the phrase backup camera. In these databases. All right, we're doing okay, but let's try a few things here. Let's try the subject field again. I'm just going to add it to this. I'm going to put and SU camera, just to make sure that cameras are actually a focus of these articles and that backup cameras aren't just mentioned. If camera is one of the keywords, then we're probably doing pretty well on getting the kind of articles that we want. Well, that brought us way down, but this set does require that the phrase backup camera be in here, and I'm still a little bit concerned about whether we've covered everything by searching for this particular phrase. I'm not that certain what these cameras are called, even though we got all these hits. So let's try perhaps the subject field again. I'm going to again export this to a spreadsheet so that I can read it more easily. And we see cameras there, digital cameras, photography, electronic cameras. But you know, I looked through this before and I did not find anything else that's a synonym for backup camera. So let's try something else here. Something we probably should have been doing from the start is to take a look through our results list. And rear vision. Rear view safety. Could these cameras also be called rear view cameras? Well, one way to check would be to go back to Google. In Google, let's try rear view camera. Yeah, some of the articles actually say backup camera, but they've got rear view camera in the articles. So rear view camera is a phrase that is used. There it is again. We probably should include this in our search. So let's go back. Again, I've prepared this in advance so that I'd be able to copy paste and get it right for you and do it quickly. Let's do this search. Backup or rear view, one word, or rear view, two words, directly before the word camera, pre-0. Ah, look how much the hits went up. A lot of these hits were not on backup camera, but on rear view camera. So that was a good save. It was a good thing that we took a look at the list and then did our web search to supplement that as well, to confirm that rear view camera is a phrase that is used. In this case, perhaps more than backup camera. So we're off to a good start here in terms of retrieving records with rear view or backup camera. I have to wonder if some of these might be about rear view cameras, like in a warehouse or a security camera or something. Let's make sure that these are about cars. This may not reduce our hits much, but it'll help us to make certain we're getting the right hits. Yeah, it reduced it some, not a whole lot, but that was another wise move. So our final step here in terms of our term search is we also want to bring in the building block of safety or collisions or accidents. So let's do this. S for and collision, or accident, or let's say injury. Still a lot of hits here. And if we look through this results list, it suggests that we're getting a lot of articles that talk about a whole laundry list of car features. And what that suggests to me is that our next move should be to reduce this set to records that really make a close focus on the cameras, on the rear view cameras. How can we do that? Let's make sure we're using the right set here. Yes, set 3 is our big search on backup or rear view cameras. Let's search for records that have that in the title. We'll search for S3, that's our set with the backup or rear view cameras, but we'll look for that set in the title. See, we can just do it this way. We don't have to do TI parentheses backup or rear view camera. We can just do TI parentheses S3. But we also want to make sure that our final result includes automobile or car. We also want to make sure that it includes collision or accident or injury. So that was our set 5. So we'll do TI S3 and S5. There we go. So a lot of these articles, you can see right from the start, have a real focus on the safety of rear view cameras or backup cameras. Backup cameras could save lives. Rear driving accidents down modestly, despite sharp increase in backup cameras. So for better or worse, the topic is discussed. These are really nicely on point. And we brought it into focus, in this case, by putting one of our key terms in the title. Okay, let's do one more. This one will be in the areas of computer engineering and, let's say, biomedical engineering. It's a somewhat unusual search, as you'll see. Here are some of the databases that might be suggested for this type of search, but let's look at the search itself. We're going to be looking for articles about something called brain painting. And this illustration shows you basically what it is. Someone puts on a sort of cap with EEG sensors in it, and that picks up on their brain waves in different parts of their brain. And this is electronically hooked up to a computer that has an imaging program on it. And in that way, they can make colorful paintings of shapes on the computer. So the person can actually make paintings on the computer without using their arms or hands at all. This is a fascinating thing in itself, but it has special usefulness in working with patients who are paralyzed, who've lost the use of their arms or even their whole bodies. It helps them both as a sort of brain therapy and also emotionally. So we're going to look for articles about brain painting, and in particular, as it relates to patients with ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease. This, as you know, is a particularly cruel disease that causes patients to gradually lose the use of their entire bodies while they still maintain the brain function. So this is something uniquely valuable to people like that. This topic clearly makes use of computer technology and engineering, but it also has medical aspects. So we may want to look for information about this across a wide range of databases. So what I propose to do with this search is to begin in all of the non-patent databases that I have on ProQuest Dialog. So let's get back into ProQuest Dialog. So here we are still in the 28 automotive databases. There are a couple of ways I can get myself into all of the databases. I can go up here to where it shows the number of databases, click, and if I just click on Select All General Databases, I'll be in all of them, but I don't have to do that either. I can just click here where it says All Databases, and now I am in all of my non-patent databases in basic search. But I do want to go back to command line because we're going to use the Thesaurus again here. And when I click on Thesaurus, you'll notice there's a whole lot of them here. I'm in all of the databases, and so I'm seeing the whole selection of all of the thesauri that we have. You might notice that these cover a broad range of topics. We have thesauri for databases having to do with medicine and food and georef, in other words, geology, materials and space and all these things. But we're going to use the Inspec one once again. And we're going to type brain painting. And sure enough, the Thesaurus was smart enough to figure out what we're talking about. Here we see brain-computer interfaces, and that surely is what we want. I'm going to put a check mark there, but let's also click on it. Well, we don't want to go to these broader terms. We want to stay focused on what has to do more directly with brain painting. Let's look at the sticky note. Yeah, see, these are all related, but I don't think we want to add these terms to our search. Let's stick with brain-computer interfaces, but then we will add painting to that. So we'll click Add to Search. And now we have a search for the exact subject, brain-computer interfaces. And there are quite a few records on that, but let's make it a little broader, and instead of searching on that phrase as an exact subject, let's look for it as a term anywhere in the record. We'll put truncation here so we get interface, interfaces, interfacing. And we get quite a few more, as you can see, but we still want to combine that with paint or painting, so we'll do, we're now up to set 8. I'll do S8 and paint or painting. So that cut down our hits very appropriately. Let's make sure, though, that we're not missing records that use our actual original phrase. We'll do S9 or, quote, brain painting, unquote. Because we're definitely going to want those. And that brings us up to a few more. And our final step will be to also make sure that our records talk about ALS. So we'll do S10 and paren ALS or, quote, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And that should be enough. And there we go. A very nice set of records, very good sized set. Out of curiosity, let's see what databases we ended up getting hits in. And this is interesting. We're getting hits in the engineering databases. We got a number of theses. This is an interesting topic for scholars to look into. And we also got hits in medical databases like Medline and MCare. We even got a hit in this business database, Thomson Reuters Embargoed Research Collection. So another good search, relying mainly on the Thesaurus. So I hope that has been helpful for you. I hope that has been useful. Let's take a moment before we wrap up to review what we've looked at here. We began by looking at some of your options for database selections, starting with the industry groups that have been pre-prepared for you and what they include. Also, how you can modify those groups on the fly by simply deselecting any particular databases that you don't want to use in your search. You can also create custom shortcuts for your own groups of databases. We looked particularly at two important databases for engineering called Inspec and EiCompendex. And then we turned to different search tools that you can use in doing your searches. We saw how you can use the results list itself to suggest additional terms. If you don't see helpful new terms in the titles alone, you can use the detailed view to see part of the abstract. You can also download a sample record or two, pick a record that looks especially good, and see what useful terms might be in that record before you go back and try again. The Thesaurus, we found, can be used in at least two different ways. You can use the Inspec Thesaurus either to find words to use in a plain language term search, or you can actually create a search using the Thesaurus in Inspec, which will do a search for specific terms in the exact subject field. As to the narrow by subject filter, we looked at several ways that this can be used. These included creating new sets directly from those narrow by filters. You can also use those subject filters to discover additional terms to use in your plain language term searching, and we also found that you can search within the subject field, as we did with cruise control, in order to learn more about the terms to use. Last but not least, we saw how you can extend and expand on your results of these techniques by going onto the internet, doing a regular internet search on some of these words, see how they're used, and whether the internet can easily suggest additional terms that you can use going back into ProQuest Dialog. Here is our contact information and some links that you may find useful. You can always call us at 800-3-DIALOG or email us at customer@dialog.com. The links you have here include those for taking additional webinars, which we hope you will do, and there's also a link to the Inspec website where you can find all kinds of documentation about the database, including, for example, a complete list of their journal coverage. So if you will, let's take one more look back in ProQuest Dialog. So here we are in EiCompendex, and I have brought up just a typical record here, and I want to show you something. As I scroll down, there's a section here called DOI with a strange looking link. Now you may be familiar with this, but in case you are not, this is what it's for. I can click on this, and it takes me to a web page that has the full document. So although EiCompendex and Inspec are not full-text databases, they do link you to the full text from most of their records. This, you will notice, is absolutely free. You can download the PDF of the entire document. You can download citations. And so this is a very valuable feature in EiCompendex, also available in Inspec. I leave you with that final tip and enjoy the rest of your day.